there. Now, this fellow was completely financially dependent on his partner, and the only money that he was earning was he could get a bit of part-time work here and a bit of part-time work there, but $200 a week really was just covering his absolute basic needs. So he came to me, found us through the internet, and he came to me, and I put the case forward to Inland Revenue, and they came back and said, no, we're not satisfied with the IR40. The surplus income is heaps for him to offer more to the Commissioner. And so it was such a long, sort of drawn-out process where I'm sort of saying, but hang on, you can see that this belongs to his partner, that his money, and they could see the income there, and they said, but it doesn't matter, that's family income, etc., etc. So after a long, drawn-out negotiation, with a reference back to the ANZ case, they then backed off and said, well, okay, now we'll just take 20% of your income through a deduction notice, which is fine. Like I said before, it's not about getting it all written off. It's about making some solid decisions, about not kicking people while they're down and working with them without trying to also financially rape, if I can use that word, the partner who had nothing to do with it, who was already looking after him anyway. So if anything, what it was going to do was drive a stake straight through the relationship. And however, at least they backed off. Okay, using a legal threat as a debt collection tool. I don't know about you guys, but I'm seeing this more and more and more. I think it's a lazy technique. And if it's not defended, it's a very easy action. Because the client or the taxpayer sort of has to say, well, okay, what do I do here? He's either got to come to one of us and start paying through his nose, or else he starts making decisions about what he's going to do when he's bankrupted. I guess from an internal point of view, the same amount of paperwork may not be necessary. But what it does is it discourages genuine negotiation because it introduces urgency into the equation. It introduces stricter timeframes. When they start issuing out statutory demands or final demands, you start getting into days. And I'm not going to lecture you about that because you all know what the statutory demand does. But it puts you on that slippery slope and you've really got to do something. So from IRD's point of view, I guess it must be a really good technique. It works wonders when the taxpayer is uninformed, I suspect. However, I do know that they were previously warned by the courts for using it as a tool of collection. But it's interesting to note that this seems to be happening more and more and more now. I'm also finding an increase in PAYE prosecution threats. Now, I can understand where IRD's coming from there. PAYE is a very serious tax, and when I was talking to some clients of mine just a couple of weeks ago, they still don't get that it's tantamount to theft, that they're actually taking the money of their employers. So of course there's an education exercise having to go on there to say, well, now what we've got to try and do is try and stop you from being interviewed by the IRD, because the IRD's already sent out a letter saying this is how bad it is. Do you realise that you can get 5 years jail and $50,000 fine? They've got no idea. And then you see these previously calm people falling into, eyes like BP road maps and start crying because they face jail. So it's an ongoing educational exercise. Okay. Outsourcing debt collection to the private sector. As we all realise that, I think that came through just through the Institute just the other day, didn't it? Yeah. It's. I was just made aware of this just a couple of weeks ago. We can only imagine that it covers the things like, low priority debt or a low dollar amount. Taxes that may be not as important as PAYE, maybe not as important as GST. And what it does is it frees up the officers. gives them a higher priority it gives them a more defined target to work on, and they start working on the high value debt work, so that they're not mucking around with somebody that's got $2,000 worth of working for families debt that she was overpaid because a daughter may have come back and lived with her and then took off. That's just a waste of time. Okay, I also note that they're suggesting credit card to pay arrears. Now this one really got me going. So was a question or? Oh, okay. This really got me going because, these taxpayers are already doing it tough. That's why they're in tax arrears. We're still not out of the recessionary times. And here's IRD saying, oh look, you can put it onto your credit card. Never mind about the 20% debt. We're only going to charge you 9% if you came with us. But they don't say that it's on their website in smaller print, of course, that there's a convenience fee to Westpac of 1.42%. So it's a nice little earner. I just sort of wonder whether that contributes to hardship in itself. And consistent with the mission statement, improving the economic and social well-being of all New Zealanders. That's the mission statement of Inland Revenue. And I just sort of wonder how some of these decisions make you reflect on that. How do you want to do these? Do you want me to go through this, Craig? Returns must be filed first. This is sensible. It means a lot more work for you guys. But it's a sensible thing. How can you start dealing with the debt if all the returns aren't in? They encourage voluntary payments even more. Of course, the late payment penalties continue, but I wonder if the taxpayers actually know that. Interesting thing is the confirmation of an instalment arrangement can now be verbal. Sounds easy for the taxpayer, but what it does is it sanctions instalment arrangements done by the call centre. There's no financials needed here. Now this came around again by IRD, I think, trying to quicken up the process of getting rid of this debt. And what it's done is it's put the control of some of this instalment arrangement assessment, if you like, with call centre people. And I've been subject to it myself, where they've said, I can only accept something so I can get this paid off in 2 years. So you can imagine what the client out there is thinking, God, I hate dealing with IRD anyway. If I can get this instalment arrangement on the phone now, then that'll get them out of my hair. So they agree to it. You've got to pay $2,000 a month. Can you do that? Oh yeah, I'll find it. I'll go, oh, yeah, we're into it. Now that's in place. And all of a sudden, 3 months down the track, without any thought as to whether that can be sustainable, has the client come to see their advisors like yourselves? I've just made an instalment arrangement over the phone. $2,000. All of a sudden, they can't sustain it. 3 months down the track, the instalment arrangement defaults. That then, under the new standard practice statement, of course, that means that they don't have to take another arrangement in the future. So if they then come in the future to a formal advisor and say, look, can you go to IRD and put this in place for me? IRD can just turn around and say, well, you've failed a previous arrangement, so we're not bound to accept another one. Never mind that, well, at the time of the first arrangement, nobody worked out whether I could sustain it or not. And that, well, that's not our problem. So I think that there's some issues there as well. It's more common now to suggest to sell assets. Another interesting one that I noticed that they've changed is that they will apply credits now to an instalment arrangement. This is credits that are due to the taxpayer, unless the taxpayer requests otherwise. So before, they had to ask. Let's say, can we use these credits and put them against that instalment arrangement? But now they don't have to. So what they're doing is they're turning things around. They're tilting it back into their favour. There's no more, and a big one here, no more monitoring on a monthly basis. In the old standard practice statement, it was stated that Inland Revenue would monitor the instalment arrangement on a monthly basis. And so it put the onus on them. And of course, what that was doing, and what we've seen since I've been doing this, is that there's a lot of taxpayers out there that have actually got the upper hand through that clause. Because they say, well, I actually defaulted 18 months ago, but you didn't ring me. How come you didn't tell me? There's a lot more a lot more emphasis going on the compliance history now, whether they've made payments on time, whether the returns have been filed on time, and their income. There's also an online option. It's as easy for IRD. But then I've got to ask the question is, how thick is that ice? Because with tax, it can be black and white, very much legislative based. But with tax debt, it's a very, very grey area. And so that means it's a lot bigger and it's a lot harder to negotiate. So as I said, it tilts these odds straight back into IRD again. Craig, I'm quite happy just to skip this if we talk about it. Because that was just some more stories over there. So